Welcome back to ET with GOTB. No cup sets in the fourth round yet. Canada have signed a familiar face, and the Barclays WSL Hall of Fame welcomes 4 new inductees. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. We thought we'd have lots of FA Cup drama to delve into today. We have some, but 7 ties were postponed at the weekend due to frosty conditions. And of the games that did go ahead, sadly, there were no real surprises, were there?
No, there was still lots of action.
I didn't say there was no action. I just said there was no surprises.
No, there weren't any surprises.
Different thing. We will run through the results, pick out some highlights. You're going to pick out a highlight and look at what the 5th round draw has brought us. As I said, Sophie, I am going to ask you to pick something out, but we're not going to do what we normally do, which is like player and a tactic thing. Just given there were so many games happening, it's quite difficult to see them all. So I'm going to get you to kind of just pick some, like a moment, a thing you'd like our listeners to know about, think about. We'll then look at the latest signings across the board, including managerial. And finally, we've got a little something special for you from the Barclays WSL Hall of Fame at the end of this episode as well. If you can hear the trotting feet, that is the rabbit doing laps around the carpet.
Going up and down next to me. In my peripheral, all I can see is the bunny.
We're in a separate room that is wooden floors, and he's not a fan of them anymore. He's too old. So he's just trotting up and down and not got the best control of the old back legs anymore. So he's a little bit more heavy-footed than we're used to. Anyway, before we get going with this app, this is your weekly reminder to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, or wherever you're watching this podcast, so you do not miss an episode. And of course, follow us across all of our social media platforms. We're on Blue Sky now, aren't we?
We are.
We're on all the things. We might not know what all the things do, but we're on all the things.
We're on all the things.
At Girls on the Ball. It's very easy
to
remember.
Start, at least.
It is. We're getting there. We're getting better at things. We hope. But yeah, if you're following us there, you won't miss any of our content. And we've got something special as well coming up for you later in the week. I'll give you more information on that a little bit later in the episode. So let's run through the FA Cup 4th round results of the games that went ahead. Manchester United 7, West Brom 0, Fulham 0, London City Lionesses 5, Exeter 1, Sunderland 7, Man City 3, Ipswich 0, Newcastle 1, Forest 0, Cheltenham 0, Wolves 2, London Bees 0, Rugby Borough 6, Chelsea 4, Charlton 0, Aston Villa 9, Bristol Rovers 0. So the rescheduled fixtures, I'm pretty sure they're all rescheduled now. Palace versus Sheffield, 7 p.m, 14th of Jan. Tonight. So keep an eye out for that one. Also happening tonight, Blackburn Rovers, tomorrow. Blackburn Rovers versus Portsmouth at 7 p.m. Also tomorrow is Leicester versus Stoke City at 7:45. So you've got 2 fixtures there to look out for. And then the rest of the fixtures are on the 29th of January. Brighton versus Durham at 7 p.m. Everton versus Tottenham at 7 p.m. West Ham versus Liverpool at 7:45. And Arsenal versus Bristol at 7:45. Godspeed to those who have to do the long drives on a weekday for an evening kickoff.
Durham have to do that trip to London now 3 more times in the next 2 weeks.
Just stay down here. Have a hollybobs. There's loads of pitches. You should come down here and hang out. A word on the postponed fixtures, Soph. I know, look, this happens at this time of year. It's not that controversial. It happens across the men's game, particularly when teams further down the leagues are playing and maybe their facilities. I mean, the facilities in the top leagues here struggle with this kind of weather. But perhaps 1 or 2 could have done better with the announcements.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously happens less in the men's games at times because they have more investment in their infrastructure. And it's always been a problem at this time of the year. The first 2 weekends or 3 weekends of January in particular, always tough. I did see someone ask us on Instagram about whether the winter break should be moved to January rather than December, but I do think you'll have the same problem. Those last 2 weekends in December after Christmas or whatever are equally as bad, if not worse. I mean, we've had actually a pretty mild Christmas this year, but there has been frost
Last
around.
year?
Last year was cold, I think.
Do you remember the snow? Was that not last year? The 2 weeks of snow?
Oh, yes, we did. I remember we were in Kingsmeadow.
Yeah, and it was very Christmas.
So it's just the problematic part of, being in England and the winter's getting colder and more snowy and frosty. You can't change the weather. I think what needs to be done more, and I don't really know what the solution is for fixed grounds. If you're going to play the FA Cup is going to be played at grounds where there is less investment, and even in the WSL, you have those rounds being played,
especially in the earlier rounds.
Yeah. So I think I'm not sure what you can do in that. I know when the Kings Meadow thing happened a couple of years ago, and the icy game, the infamous icy game, everyone was calling for under-soil heating. That's not possible. I'm sorry, it's just not possible to put that infrastructure into every single ground. It's just not going to happen. And so I think they just need to be more careful with the scheduling. For me, it's more pragmatic, understanding that yes, we all want games to be played, and it causes a headache if they're not played. But getting a team down to London from the northeast and then telling them 3 hours before kickoff is just not acceptable. I don't think, and I think we just need to be accepting of the facts as they are. Games will get called off. You just need to allow teams to have more flexibility with that a bit.
I personally find like the 9:30 pitch inspections frustrating. Strange. When they're ignored. When there's a 9:30 pitch inspection and then the game will be confirmed closer to the time of kickoff when the referee comes or whatever, and you're just like, well then why is the 9:30 pitch inspection there if you're just going to ignore the results of it? If it's 10 degrees, you don't need a 9:30 pitch inspection because no one's going to be waiting to find out if the pitch is frozen or not.
But also 9:30 doesn't actually give it a lot of time to warm up either. I mean, it's still early in the morning. You're not really going to have... I mean, we were driving up to Fulham on Sunday out of Kent, and it was -3 in Ashford as we were passing through. I'm sorry, that's not going to warm up by 9:30 in the morning.
Yeah, but also that was like the Brighton game, right? Like they moved the fixture by an hour and a half. That wasn't going to change anything. We weren't going to have some tropical change in temperature.
Warming of the pitch.
Climate change is obviously very bad.
Unless you've got the covers on, like I think they had at Kings Meadow and Chelsea, or you've been doing something to heat the pitch. I do remember going to Aston Villa. Do you remember the pictures when I went to Aston Villa?
This is amazing.
And they literally had like little fire pits in the four corners of the pitch trying to heat up the soil.
They had these tins, big drums, on top of wooden slats with fires in them dotted around the pitch.
Probably not the most health and safety conscious, but
did the job.
It seemed to be doing the job. It heated the ice off the pitch. And I think we were an hour delay with kickoff. I think probably what people could... It's frustrating and it's not the solution, but you could probably accept a 30-minute delay in kickoff if you realise at the time that it's not right. If the pitch is defrosting. If you're so close to it being on.
And you're like, this is working.
But I think it's just everyone has to be a bit more understanding of where we're at. And this isn't going to go away. Next year will be the same. And the year after. We're not going to miraculously all play in Stamford Bridge every week where they do have the ability.
Well, also well done to everyone getting their replays rescheduled so quickly. So at least people know when they are going to be. I know it was tricky with the Subway Cup happening next week, which made it a little bit tricky. And it also adds in the headache of teams having to travel a lot.
Well, like Sheffield having their game called off, 9:30, I think, 10 o'clock on Sunday, after the game had been changed in time anyway, to find out that they had to be back in London today. And that just creates problems. And I think maybe that's where the flexibility can come in. I can't remember. So early February when the fifth round games are played.
8th and 9th of Feb.
So we have a little bit of time in between that. Not much time, but a little bit. And we do have that week where most of the other ones are being played the 29th.
Yeah.
Maybe there's just a bit of common sense going. I know maybe access to pitches or whatever is another problem, but give them time to get back up, and then not have to turn around and essentially come straight back down again, which is almost what they had to do.
Pretty much. Speaking of the 5th round draw, here's what we've got out of the hat. Wolves versus Manchester United, Chelsea versus Everton or Spurs, Blackburn or Portsmouth versus Sunderland, Manchester City versus Leicester or Stoke, Palace or Sheffield versus Newcastle, Villa versus Brighton or Durham, Rugby Borough versus West Ham or Liverpool, and Arsenal or Bristol City versus London City Lionesses. If you've managed to keep up with that, well done, because it's always tricky to get your head around what the actual fixtures are going to be when I've said "or" so many times. Not too many, sadly, intriguing encounters there, to be honest. Actually, I think maybe Palace or Sheffield versus Newcastle is quite a nice one, because you've got one of those teams going into the quarterfinals.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think also Sunderland, Blackburn or Portsmouth, one of those teams will be going through the quarterfinals. Yeah. My eyes actually, I think, are drawn to Wolves against United and Borough against West Ham or Liverpool. more, and like they will be the underdogs, no doubt.
But great, the hosting as well.
But they're hosting an FA Cup game, and that's huge for them. And I think it's what you want to see in the FA Cup.
We remember Lewis versus Manchester United in the 5th round.
Yeah, there's really special occasions, and we've had it for many years on both sides of the sport, men's and women's, where, when the lower clubs or the underdogs get to host a game, and we were at Fulham at the weekend, and it was a special occasion for them, even though they, they needed probably a miracle to win that game, just because of the gulf between Tier 5 to Tier 2, and then also the fact that London City Lionesses are a completely professional outfit and Fulham aren't yet. But I think that's exactly why we have the FA Cup, why we play these ties, and you just want to see more of them. And
great for them to be playing at Craven Cottage. Although I do love an FA Cup where the ground is less than ideal, and you've got someone like we did at the weekend in the men's up on someone else's shoulders, putting the nets back together, or teams getting changed in essentially a corridor.
Do you remember when we went to Crawley to watch Crawley against Arsenal?
Yes.
And they brought in an extra portable stand to seat everyone, and everyone's right on the pitch. And it was when we went to Ipswich, Southampton, when Kayla Rendell scored that goal.
Yes.
Goalkeeper scored the goal, and everyone was literally up against the barriers right on the pitch. It creates such an intense atmosphere. It's proper old school football.
Yeah. Okay, we had also shout out to Ella Toon, Viv Miedema and Lauren James all coming back as well and getting minutes, which is brilliant. And in Miedema and Toon's case, scoring goals as well, which is exactly what they want as they come back into the game after injury. So well done to all three of them for getting back on the pitch. Have you got something from this weekend that you would like to highlight for our listeners? It can be a player, a fixture, a goal, a flurry of goals.
So I'm going to do a runner-up and one.
Okay.
With an extra one. So I mentioned
in third place.
I mentioned Fulham, and I think it was such a nice occasion at Craven Cottage, very special for both teams. A London derby there, over 2,000 fans. As I said before, exactly what the FA Cup is about. Underdog against kind of a team that are really trying to punch for WSL promotion. So that's pretty special. Shout out to Eleanor Dale for Sunderland, who scored 4 goals. That's pretty impressive day's work. And really impressive from her.
Well, no, there's only 2 players who scored 7 goals.
Ellen Jones scored 3. So I think it was, pretty good. And then my first one is going to go to Ella Toon, because I think I've been saying on a lot of podcasts and stuff over the last few months, I think the break actually really would have done her well. She's one of the players who played the most amount of football in the last couple of years. She's obviously had such a hard time in her personal life as well, with her dad passing. And I think you could see it, in that first bit of the season. I'm pretty sure this was her first goal of the campaign. And you could see in the first half of the season that she was struggling. I know she wants to play. She's one of those players who always wants to play. And she actually needs someone to tap her on the shoulder and just say, you can't play today. I do think that. I think someone needs to step up at Manchester United and be a bit firmer. But equally, I think having the injury, allowing her body to rest properly,
she called it a blessing in disguise.
Her mind to rest properly and to be able to get back on the pitch and really enjoy herself. And you got to be excited, because I think a lot of people have been wondering where kind of that Ella Toon of the Euro 2022 have been for a little while, and some don't think that she's pushed on. I think there's always that saying, class is permanent, form is temporary. I've always felt that she has those levels to be right at the top of the game. I think she was just being chronically overused, never given a break, and then obviously the personal stuff is going to hurt a lot too. So I think just having that 2 months off just gives her a refresh. She looked really, really bright when she came on.
And what a goal.
And a brilliant goal. And I know people will say, well, it was only West Brom, but she came on and she was,
Doesn't matter who you're playing, that goal's not getting stopped.
But also I disagree with that. I think West Brom, the scoreline kind of doesn't tell the story of the game. Yes, Manchester United were on top and they were always going to win it, but I think West Brom held them pretty well for a good
77th minute, I think, when they United got their second goal. And then, of course, I think it all just kind of fell apart after that.
As it probably does. I think once that second goal goes in, that's what happens. But I think she added a lot of creativity and kind of energy to the forward line, and she's making those runs into the boxes that I'm desperate to see her do for England more often. So, wishing her good things in 2025.
Welcome back, Ella Toon. Okay, we're going to get to the transfer window. There hasn't been loads since we chatted on Friday, but I think the biggest one is going to be not in the WSL, but Casey Stoney to Canada. Tell our listeners why you think this is a great move for both parties.
I think everyone was just waiting to see where Casey Stoney landed. She is one of the biggest, brightest young coaching stars coming through, and what she's done at club level is, I think, often forgotten about in some ways. I do think people really underestimated what it took to build United up from nothing, build San Diego up from nothing, and get them, well, United's case, promotion, and then in San Diego's case, winning the NWSL Shield, which is technically winning the league. I know.
Yes, I know.
Americans will argue with me about that, but they won the league part of the year. So I think we were all waiting to see where she landed. I wasn't sure where she'd go for club or for international. I think international probably suits her quite well, and Canada have got a bit of a gem on their hands as well.
Yeah, she's absolutely a player-focused manager, which I think the Canadian team will appreciate. And I actually think it shows Canada, the Canadian Federation will know what they're getting with Casey Stoney, and she is someone who will expect high levels, won't let things slide. And I think by bringing her in, it's almost like they're going to be held to a bit more account, but which I think is
she's
is
the
good.
Ultimate professional, and she was that as a player, and she was a leader as a player, and I think she's showing that in her management. I think she's got so much more developing to go as well, which is exciting for anyone who has her. So I'm excited to see what they do. She starts at the Pinnacle Cup in February, so it's going to be intriguing. Also, really, going on what we said in the last pod, it's a really exciting time for Canada at the moment. They got this league starting. Yes, things need to be ironed out and it needs to be given time, but there seems to be a bit more energy around Canadian football compared to the last 2 years where there's been a lot of controversy.
Yes, of course. Back in the WSL, United have made some moves. Clinton is extended by a year. Jade Riviere as well is sticking around. And Kayla Rendell has come in between the sticks. So they've got another option on the bench, which is great for her.
Desperately need a keeper.
Yeah.
I know they had Safia Middleton Patel, but she's quite young still. I think Kayla Rendell is Southampton kind of born and bred. She came through the academy there. But I think she stepped out and realised that this is a big opportunity for her, and hopefully will do her good in her England career good, but also for Manchester United to have someone who they know can step in immediately for Fallon Tillis-Joyce is really, and can do a good job, is really important.
Anyone else we should be looking out for? I think we've covered a lot of it between Friday's pod and this pod, but there's a couple, especially in the NWSL, that may be free agents.
Yeah, and we had Kira Caruso on free agency now, I think. That was announced yesterday. And obviously there's still going to be chat around Goma and whatever happens with that. But I do think there are some teams that have been incredibly quiet so far. You've got someone like a Palace or a Leicester City who both are desperately in need of new energy, I think, and depth.
Yes.
That they could bring in. And I think what they do in the next 2 weeks determines which of them, there's others in the mix, but which of them are more likely to survive. But yes, I do think they've been awfully quiet, those two.
Yes, definitely.
Arsenal have also been quiet. Yeah. Maybe they're happy at the moment. They have a really good squad, but there are certainly
too busy nailing down who's going to be the manager.
But there's certainly gaps in that squad where you could bring in someone that could really help.
For sure. So how long is left in the January transfer window?
2 weeks. It finishes on the 30th of January, so
we're
halfway through.
Loads of time. Okay, moving on to the Barclays Hall of Fame section. Last night there were 4 new inductees into the Barclays Hall of Fame, and they were Alex Scott, Steph Houghton, Gilly Flaherty, and referee Rebecca Welch. Very worthy entries, and we got to have a chat with all of them. So in this episode, we are going to give you one of those entrants, and then you'll hear from the other 3 later in the week in a separate podcast, just because we're nice like that and we wanted to give you something extra. So this entrant is an absolute trailblazer in her field, despite the fact that she hates the spotlight on her. She was working in the NHS when she became a referee in 2010 and carried on in that role until 2019, where she turned full-time. She's refereed in the WSL, FA Cup finals, Champions League finals at the Women's Euros, World Cup and Olympics. She was the first female referee to officiate in the EFL, in the Men's FA Cup and in the Premier League. The Barclays Hall of Fame is not the only Hall of Fame she is inducted into as well. She was also inducted into the English Football Hall of Fame. God, she'd hate all of these accolades. My God. So she may not like the title, but Rebecca Welch is absolutely a trailblazer in her field and has inspired so many. She is also now the manager of the Select Group Women's Professional Game for the PGMOL. So I've no doubt she's going to inspire many more. And it's great that she's sticking around and within refereeing. We spoke to her last night at the event, and here is what she had to say.
Firstly, congratulations on becoming an inductee. How does it feel?
Yeah, it's surreal actually. Quite shocked when I found out, because players get inducted, but I've never heard of a ref. So yeah, really honoured to be here alongside some absolute legends tonight.
When you think back to when you first started out in football, could you imagine that the game A would get to where it is, and B, you would be smashing all these glass ceilings?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think even when I started to play, I was playing with the boys' teams at school. And even when I first became a ref, this wasn't the plan when we stood here at night. I thought, yeah, I'll just do it, maybe do it for a couple of years. Looks good on my CV. And then I always say kind of got a bit out of hand. But listen, I've had a great career. I've been very lucky to be involved in the game and get the opportunities that I've been given.
Is there any moment in your career that maybe stands out the most, or is one that you think about most often?
I think the 2017 FA Cup final at Wembley will always be one that stands out. Wembley is one of them places where the FA Cup should be played. I think it had only been played there twice before. And just walking out there, I mean, it's massive. Not sure I'd want to run on it again, but I think just being a part of the women's game at Wembley for the FA Cup is just unbelievable.
Magical moment. Yeah. If you could tell young Rebecca, knowing what you know now, one thing as a kid, what would you tell her?
Probably ending up being a ref, don't be too hard on yourself. I think, sometimes as refs, and certainly as me, we can be too critical of ourselves, and there's a lot of other people that will do that as well. So, just give yourself some time, don't be too critical, and don't try to get there too quick. Enjoy the journey, because at some point it will be finished, and I'm a product of that now.
What about advice for getting more young female referees into the game?
Yeah, I think we need to highlight. I think we're highlighting it more now than we ever had with through social media and online. And I think it's an opportunity for people who potentially might not make it as footballers, but there's always an avenue to be involved in football as a referee. I've been to some of the biggest and best stadiums in the world. I would never be able to do that as a footballer, but I've had the opportunity to do as a referee, and I've grabbed the football fans.
And finally, one person in your own personal Hall of Fame, anyone in your life, who would you induct?
Can't pick one, but so I'll go for Joy. I'll go for my mum and dad, and I think they've really grounded us and kept us grounded throughout this whirlwind of 5 years that we had, and just really important in my life. And probably wouldn't be stood here today if it wasn't for them.
Lovely to hear from her. She's very nice. She's very funny. Very self-deprecating, and as I said, does not like the spotlight on her. So I'm sure she enjoyed last night, to be fair. But I'm
also so glad that it's not just players.
Yeah,
being in. I know coaches as well, but I think it's really important to recognise that across the board, the women's game is developing so much, and there's so many different roles in which you can shine, and it's not only a select number will really shine on that football pitch. It's just the nature of the sport. So there are other roles that women can get into, and it's just making this sport a lot more accessible and a lot more it makes when people are growing up, it gives them someone to look at and go, well, I could be a referee, I could be a coach, I could be a player. And it's just giving people more opportunities and more kind of people to look up to, and if you can see it, you can be it.
And as she says, someone has to be the first, so she understands that she has to get all of these accolades, but she said the main thing is that she isn't the last, and I think that's the key thing, particularly in the refereeing field. So yeah, it was great to hear from her and chat to her. Later this week, as I said, we will have an episode where you can hear from Alex, Steph and Gilly on their induction into the Barclays Hall of Fame. So listen out for that. And if you're subscribed, it will mean you'll be the first to hear it when it lands. Otherwise, we'll be back with our next episode of Extra Time with Girls on the Ball early next week. So make sure you listen out for that. We'll chat to you then.